Gotta Catch 'Em All. Brackets, Pokemon, Bad Guys, etc. A Marvel fanfiction written on AO3 by Lemon Lily B. The link for this fanfiction will be in the description box below, so I encourage you all to go check it out. Tony Stark knows very, very little about Pokemon cards. He knows a lot of things. He is Tony fucking Stark, after all. He hasn't gotten this far in life without knowing a lot of things. That's just a fact. But he's not an asshole. And he knows when to admit he doesn't know something. And it's not really that big of a deal to him that he doesn't know what Pikachu looks like or hasn't even owned a Pokemon card. He's never really understood the appeal of collecting cards in the first place. But that might be due to some residual trauma surrounding a certain Howard Stark and a certain baseball card collection that no longer exists. In fact, for most of his life, he hasn't spent much time thinking about card collecting or anything Pokemon related at all. That was until Peter Parker came into his life, and he starts hearing words like energy type and shiny cards and special attack when Peter is on the phone with his friend Ned. Tony has Friday to inform him about all the things Peter is discussing Pokemon cards, but that's the extent of it at first. It isn't until he's known Peter for a bit longer that Pokemon cards come up again. Peter is over at the tower one day doing homework before lab time when Tony notices he's looking a bit thin. Hey, you're looking a little... Tony stops himself because he's not going to comment on how thin a teenager is looking, even if he is a little worried. So he clears his throat. How are school lunches at Midtown? Peter, who's immersed in his homework, doesn't take his eyes off his textbook. School lunches are fine, he replies. And have you been buying school lunches lately? Eating is what he really wants to ask, but he settles for asking Peter if he's been buying lunch at school. May giving you the money I set aside for food? Peter looking up, his full attention on Tony now. You've been giving May money for food? Well, shit. Tony had no idea Peter didn't know about the food money. Well, shit, Peter says out loud, looking guilty, and Tony sighs. So, where is the lunch money going then? Tony asks, and even to his own ears it sounds a little too parental of a question. Peter drops his eyes back down to his homework and shifts in his seat, clearly hesitant, but he surprises Tony by getting out of his chair and going over to where his backpack is sitting. After rifling through for a minute, he pulls out a plastic bag full of colourful cards and holding them up for Tony to look at. Tell me what I'm seeing? They're Pokemon cards, Peter explains. Interesting. You play a game with those? They're not for me, Peter says, blushing all the way to the tips of his ears. Well, of course not, Tony replies. I figured Ted was a Pokemon guy. Oh, what? No. Ned doesn't... It's okay, Pete. No need to be embarrassed. We'll have our things in high school. What I'm wondering is why you're spending your lunch money on them. They're for kids. Kids at your school? No, little kids. Like when, I'm out Spider-Manning. Tony chuckles at the way Peter almost whispers the word. He motions for Peter to hand over the bag of cards, and when Peter does, he opens the bag and looks inside, inspecting them closely, while Peter continues. The little kids love me. They always have. They give me drawings like weed flowers that they pick and... Weed flowers? Tony asks. Oh, not like weed. Weed doesn't have flowers. I mean, I don't even know what weed looks like. I googled it once, and I don't think I saw any flowers. Very convincing, Pete. Tony interrupts, laughing. You're not in trouble for knowing what weed looks like. But get to the point. Oh, okay. That's what I like to call the flowers that are actually weeds. Like dandelions and stuff. Little kids give them to me all the time. Peter shrugs. Anyway, there's this kid who wanted to show me his Pokemon collection one day, and I told him I used to collect too when I was a kid. The next day, the kid called the police just so we can cause a scene, just so he can see Spider-Man again. So after that, I started stopping by this park once a week just to trade cards with him, and there were like 20 kids that show up sometimes. I didn't actually want to trade my own Pokemon cards though, because they were Ben's, so I kept them in a safe place and saved my lunch money to buy new cards. Pete, the way you get from point A to point B is so fascinating sometimes. I'd love to see what's going on in that brain of yours. Thanks? So, how much do Pokemon cards cost? Because you got super metabolism, and you're not skipping any more lunches. I got it? I got it. How much, Pete? Peter shrugs. It kind of depends. Tony pulls his wallet out of his pocket and takes out a $100 bill. How much would this get you? Peter's eyes go wide, but he's too stunned to answer. Tony pulls out another bill. Is 200 enough? Sometimes it seems like Tony likes to fuck with this kid. It's too easy. So when Peter doesn't reply, He pulls out 3 more bills out of his wallet and stuffs them all into the bag with the Pokemon cards. If 500 isn't enough, you let me know, okay? Peter accepts the bag with a slow, dumbfounded nod. That evening, Peter goes home with a pocket full of cash and a stomach full of pizza. And after he leaves, Tony spends way more time than he'd ever like to admit on eBay, looking at Pokemon cards. Even if he doesn't fully understand the hype surround trading and collecting cards, he gets why Spider-Man is so beloved by the city of New York, and he's happy to keep funding that. He'll learn a bit about Pokemon cards, if it means Peter is happy. He still has no fucking clue what a Bulbasaur is, though.